Well, welcome everyone. This is another Tuesday night education series. Tonight, our special guests are Jeremy and ARVA, and we're going to learn all about modern transceivers. And we're super grateful to have Jeremy and representing ARVA here tonight. Um, just a few things about the webinar. I've got the chat turned on so that you can all interact with each other in the chat if you want to comment or ask each other questions or share links with each other. Feel free to use the chat function to do that. I'll keep an eye on it, of course, and I'll be participating in the chat as well. But if there's any questions you have for Jeremy, please use the Q&A function for that. That'll signal to me that like this is something you want Jeremy to respond to. And I'll either find a time to ask that question during his presentation, or I'll queue those questions up for the end. And yeah, so tonight we have a presentation for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have extended Q&A at the end. And yeah, that's our program for tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Welcome everyone that's here, and we'll be down the road with the recording. Yeah, ARVA, the specific is 40-year transceiver company. So I know you guys have had there's different ways to learn about beacons, and they're all, for the most part they're all good. And I don't want to do by any means another presentation, so I've kind of spun this one a little different. And I always try to be objective. The last thing I want is an infomercial, so I'm hoping to make it quick and shadow a few things. Let me dive in with my screen. If you can type it in here. And you have the full screen, Ron, at this time.
It looks great.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, we're happy to be partnered with ARI this year. And what is that partnership? We really want to have an open door for people to communicate, whether it's instructors, students. ARVA, fully admittedly, we're definitely more of a product company than a marketing company. And one of the things I'll get into, I'll make some open comparisons. ARVA is the last independently owned transceiver company, so it kind of works as a plus and a minus. But the topics tonight, like I said, what makes a modern transceiver, and so some of the goals I want to hit on by the end here is just considering the real functional use for this tool. So the transceivers, it's funny in the search from beacon shovel probe or beacon probe shovel, whatever sequence you're in. The transceivers get all the glory, they get all the attention. They're an electronic item, they have this technology, they're expensive, and so they get all this attention. But really, at the end of the day, and this is going to be full circle as to a couple parts of the presentation, is it's just an A to B process. So that's the real functional. And a lot of the information I'm going to share, like I said, hopefully people pick up on it at different levels. There's all kinds of different levels, from beginner, novice users, and everything. Myself, I didn't do a total introduction, but I've been lucky to spend 20, 25 years in the backcountry. It's been a passion since my early beginnings here in Utah. I came from more of a technical background, working with ski companies and in sales, but I've been dedicated solely to ARVA for 15 years since they relaunched in the US. And some of the things I've picked up, be it from these engineers in Europe, some of the great industry events, rescue conferences, ICAR, ICW, all these that I've had a chance to rub shoulders with. These are the things I want to share. And at the end of the day, the goal is to have better conversations with either your backcountry partner or students, if you're an instructor. But yeah, just a new outlook and what you currently have in your pocket or in your holster, what your partner has, and what are their real life capabilities and what are they not. So, but yeah, what's at the end here, just what's really important, and I want to have better practice and better rescue, just like everyone shares that goal. So in order to kind of go in here, I'm going to go back a little bit, but people really need to understand the transceiver market as a whole. And like I said, we've had a chance 40 years, 41 now, where transceivers was ARVA's first product. And so we've been doing it since the beginning. We have a narrow focus, but at this time, there's only 5 manufacturers in the world that make this product. So why is that? Why isn't it like skis or snowboards or cars or something? I guess in cars you do have kind of the big five, but part of that is it's a small market. And so if you think about skis separated just by themselves, you're looking around 400 million units produced annually across from all manufacturers. And transceivers, again, a much smaller global market where it's between 300,000 and 400,000 depending on the year or the different factors. And so that market is just not as fruitful, right? And so it's a smaller market to nourish and grow all these other things that we all want in development. The other thing too is just the history of it, the history aspects. This is a very specialized product. It's electronic based. The moldings, even as an example, when a company commits to making a new mold and a new transceiver, it's an immediate $200,000 to $300,000 R&D expense just to get that process up and going. So that said, as well, it's difficult market to disrupt. It's been just slow. That's why you don't see newcomers coming in or different things quite as fast as some of these other markets. And new product as well. This is another factor, and I think this is more of a positive than a negative. But a lot of new product is slower to take the market. It really has to prove itself, has to prove its function, and its place in the market. And so people are slow to adapt, and again for good reason. And then they want to make sure. I'm personally the kind of person that hesitates buying generation one stuff, be it a phone or a car or anything else. And then lately too, recalls have been becoming more common for different reasons. People are definitely cautious. Manufacturers definitely want to have stable product out there, and all those 5 transceiver companies have gone through those processes now, and be able to respond and communicate with their customers. So those 5 brands I'm talking about. So it's no secret here, but a lot of them are regionalized, and ARVA as a company is based out of France. We are in Annecy, just about an hour 20 minutes down from Chamonix over on the Alp side. And since 1984 we've been producing various different models. And part of the graphic here, if you can just follow it down, I don't need to go down, but Baravox and Mammut out of Switzerland, BCA's out of here in the US, be it from Colorado to Washington or wherever they're at. Now Ortavox out of Germany, and then the Peeps BD sector, primarily based in Austria. They have a new owner and should have a new distributor with Black Diamond selling them off. But overall, the rates here, if you look at this graphic, I have some deep dive that's lightly shown in the spreadsheet on the right. But this is the innovation rate. So, ARVA, I mentioned being independent, and this is kind of one thing, we take a little bit of pride on is, we're constantly innovating. And there's a balance to that. But, we come out with a transceiver, new model, a new function, about every 2.2 years. Some of the other companies, again, these are longer historic as well, the ways on this, but about every 3 to 5 years is kind of the average for different companies launching that. So again, compare that to skis, compare it to some other markets, and it's just a slower rate, basically. There has been a couple manufacturers in the beginning. The only one I have on this graphic here is SOS, because this graphic's really the last 20 years. And there's a couple before then that we will talk about. So diving into those, literally into the chest here. This is kind of the base, and I won't spend too much time, but again, I want to give some people some things they may or may not know and tie back. 1968 was kind of the year actually here in the US, at a college in New York, that the SCADI was developed. The SCADI, if you look in that lower right picture, also known as the hot dog, that red long tube. From an electronics base, Dr. Lawton had some background and was able to come up with this mechanism that transmitted a pulse and could be heard and could be sectioned out with the distance and strength of the signal. These 2 lower pictures too, there's some great museums. I'm not sure where everybody's based tonight, but I know I've seen some displays from Silverton Avalanche School. These are out of the Utah Avalanche Center, and I'm not sure what area has, but if you have some of these places, I know I've seen some impressive personal collections as well from some different folks. in the industry as well in Utah and Colorado. But some of the other stuff after that 1968 era, the Swiss Army was kind of making some product at that same time. Really coming to market was those early 70s, and the Skady was marketed. The first Pieps #1 was marketed. These were sold in. These are some in that box in the upper right. You can see that second generation Skady, some of the old Baravox up in there. One of the cool factors I just learned actually researching for this was the first rescue was actually that very next year in 72. I think it was Canadian Mountain Holidays or some rescue organization in Canada. And a successful rescue was carried out with that Skady. Another very infamous one I have noted there is in 1982. If anyone's seen that, it's a Netflix series. If you haven't, I highly encourage it. The series Buried. I think it was 7 lives lost in a massive avalanche there in Alpine Meadows. And you can see the Skadies used at that time as well. And so, the technology has definitely evolved. And that's what the next couple slides will be. And that's the direction we're going. The two things I did want to say is a lot of that product, from the 70s to the 80s, mid 80s, was cool. And then it turned a little more mainstream, a little more user friendly. And that's when a lot of these companies, both ARVA and Ortovox entered the market at this time. And it was consumer oriented versus the Army or professional gear. And then in 1986, all the companies did agree on a standard frequency that changed the industry quite a bit. So now with all that said, there's been some milestones, and this is part, if you notice, all those companies have their own color, just like Region, it's still that way. I've just merged them all into a purple here. And so this graphic is kind of everybody on the same team, everybody's together. What have been these milestones that have given us, a sharper knife, better tool? And the first big milestone in the 90s there. And so BCA, with the advent of the tracker, gave a searching information from 1 antenna to 2. Again, a number and an arrow, to put it simple. ARVA was the first digital beacon in Europe with that 9000 next to it there in 1998. And one of the things that brought to the market too was it was kind of that pulsing audible that still a lot of companies use today. You get closer, the signal gets louder, it gets faster, gets more intense. And that was, brought in that era. The next big milestone into the 2000s. So 2003, a great transceiver at the market that was pretty revolutionary at the time was the Pieps DSP. And this is actually kind of a double gold medal we'll have it, with the Olympics coming. But this was both the first 3 antenna beacon to the market, as well as the first beacon with multi-victim search. So, the X, Y, and then the Z came onto this. And it was also able to recognize multiple signals, etc. A lot of these products, when they came out too, they took some polishing, and Pieps, this one had several software updates that polished up and improved that marking. And so the marking of today is definitely not the marking of 2003. And I know there's been research papers written over time with different things, but you do see things improve. But this is a good milestone in 2003. Now, milestones can be different. This was another little era coming into the later 2000s or early 2010s. And the transceiver companies, they just really wanted to put a lot into their beacons. And so there was a lot of effort. ARVA and Baravox had partnered and were working together on a W-link that was a secondary frequency. So not just that 457 kilohertz, but the 868 megahertz. And this was meant to be two-way communication. Like, almost think of it as a mesh network where beacons could talk to one another. And there was different intentions amongst the companies, I'll just say, for what maybe this could bring. It was potentially a moving victim or a not moving victim. It was potentially, the ability to mark or communicate with other beacons. So those were a couple different ways that was going at the time. Shortly thereafter too, there was a couple beacons. The Vector shown there to 2012 didn't end up going to the market, but had a really high emphasis on GPS and noting where people were. Same thing just the year prior with that S1. It would make a grid and not your traditional flux line search, and be able to lay people out a little different in a screen. Now, these two, if you notice, I don't know that these have really carried into a modern beacon now. And so I'll say they were milestones. Maybe they were of a different sort. But the thing in my personal takeaway at the end of the day, what came next was things that were simpler. And so, in a lot of ways, these previous beacons here, we were trying to put too much into them in a lot of ways. And sometimes that would slow the processor. Again, I go to the fact it's an A to B tool, and you have a slower data coming in or anything like that, or too much data. Well, in 2013, I think there was a really good balance reach. This is the year we launched the Neo. I just started with the company in the US here, and it was an easy part of my job just to mail out this transceiver because, frankly, it was about $100 less than a lot of the competition in that 350 range, and it was outperforming a lot of the $450 beacons. And part of that performance was the digital range. The DSP Pro later that year as well achieved a 60-meter search range, which was the initial one with the Neo, the first beacon to do that. And then at the same time, the user interface. I'm going to bring this up a couple times, but the screen interface is a really vital part that a lot of people discount. They get their heads in the manual, they get their heads in the reviews. I'll have a couple examples down there where an easy to read screen and intuitive acting beacon is just as important. And yeah, in addition to being simpler and intuitive, that little graphic I have is just the analogy I like to use is it's a brighter flashlight. And there's not a lot of negative with it. I know there's some transceivers that have a smaller honed flashlight. But what a lot of people don't realize is the behind the scenes in the transceiver, when it is alerted or alerts you that it has interference, it scales down and basically dims that flashlight and turns it into a 40-meter or 20-meter range, depending on the model. So to have that initial larger flashlight, again, it's like a big ear set. You can listen a little bit bigger. You can also have a more confident signal set as you come in with one or multiple signals. And then here's another one too, another big milestone in that 2016, 2018 era. This one, it's hard to pinpoint because a lot of companies, this was primarily ARVA and Baravox and Mammoet at the time, that were integrating in some interference notifications. This was the first of them. You hear about it a lot now. You hear about the 2050 rule, hopefully. A lot of instructors and manufacturers came together to create that as a standard. Well, during this time, whether it was, like I said, noticeable or not, it was being implemented into different late software versions, different beacons. And it was basically a notification when it heard that level of interference that could interfere with the search. Like I said, it was present in all four of these models. These all came out at some different times. That lower left was one that we ran just for a couple years. The third antenna was full strength, full size. So you had a really bright round basketball versus a shape for data information versus like a narrower football field, football shape. And so it was all three antennas with the same strength versus typically it's two, and then that third's a little weaker. But regardless, these all put that interference into it. And again, it's improved over time. So the current market, just with that base as a little bit of framework, both where we've come, some of the milestones, these are the beacons currently actively sold in the US. And so if you go to any of the manufacturing websites versus a retailer who might have some closeout or discontinue old inventory, this is what's currently on the market. And I'm going to bring back this slide just a couple times as we filter and talk through it. But frankly, hopefully everyone that's on this podcast is using something like these. So the base, and back to the main question, to have a slow and steady lead up, what really defines a modern avalanche transceiver? And so since 2019, all manufacturers have changed from 2 antennas to 3. That's now a standard, thankfully. But the point is now as well, a bunch of new features are being added. We have Bluetooth integrated into about half the beacons that I just showed you is currently sold. We have interference alerts also on about 80% of those that are sold, both in transmit and in search. We have voice guidance. We have some GPS things and some other, advanced features, whether it's a rescuer or targeted towards a more novice user. we have some of these things, and what we've learned from past is some of them work, some of them stick, and some of them don't. So on the flip side of the coin, I just asked what makes a modern transceiver, and I had the thought the other day of what would you describe as a non-modern? How do you differentiate the two? Or another way to cue this up would be, say you're at a checkpoint or a boundary gate, and somebody in the group rolls up, and what would they pull out that would give you a little hesitation or anything? And so this is a reason, again, not to target anything specific, but what would make you doubt, or what would make someone upgrade their transceiver? It might be aged components or the design of that specific model. It might be the fact, as in a couple of these here, that are two antennas or a one antenna analog. And again, you're buried. You don't want the person probing next to you versus right on top of you. You want that accuracy. And then pretty much anything two antenna is going to be out of that spec, where all manufacturers recommend replacing this item about every 5 to 7 years. Even if they have a newer model, is it for sure have an updated software version that can change some things. And some of these on here, they're not bad. A couple of them are newer, but they might not have actual real marking. And so they might have, you're in a group of several people or out with a large group. These are going to be very limited and slow down that A to B search time. And so the consumer expectation, to step back, and I've mentioned the market a little bit. We've kind of gotten on the same page of a lot of transceivers. We're starting to delve into what makes a modern transceiver. What would you go to the store and tell your friend to buy, tell your friend not to buy? Another thing manufacturing companies deal with is a high level of expectation. And so I laughed at a few quotes here that probably all companies get, or you'll see with students or anything else. But a lot of people have these misnomers. They've got these biases. And, the first one here, they bought the most expensive one. So it should be the highest performing one, right? It should be the best one for them. Not necessarily. Again, a simpler model, simple interface appeases most people, but, they might be a reason to pick one or two from the other. A lot of people have this expectation of technology nowadays. Why can't you just make it like my phone, right? And so the environment a Beacon works in, and specific to Bluetooth, cannot penetrate water and dense well. There's a couple Bluetooths made over time, and again, pretty good accuracy, pretty good line of direction. But when you get in that close pinpoint, it just did not perform, and that's not the nature of that frequency wave and that technology. So we also get people, again, back to the expectation. This is a call our customer service took a little while ago, and this person's just a little frantic. Hey, I put new batteries in this thing and it's not turning on. This is very disconcerting. They come with this tone, and talking them through and walking them through the basics. One wasn't turned positive to negative. And so a 5-minute conversation where this the heart's pounding and the customer used this word. Again, back to the basics. Let's make sure we're doing things right. And that's an expectation that a lot of people need to start with, just that basic level. And it's just easy to get emotional too on this type of product and everything else. But last one here too is just, I practice all the time. I want to really hone this into not necessarily judging on people's hours they're putting in or minutes or anything else. But the thing I want to take away on this is, sure, you're practicing, but what are you practicing? Why are you practicing it? And what will it bring you? And I'll bring another slide here towards the end that's going to go a little more specific into that. But there's different ways to practice than just going to a Beacon Park and realizing what the capabilities of this tool is. Now, here's the consumer reality. I'll take this from Bruce Temper's book, Avalanche Essentials, in 2013. He opens the gear section, the rescue tool section of the Beacon with a sentence I laughed at. But basically the assumption, it's our birthright as Americans to look for the perfect technology so we don't have to think anymore. I just laugh. There's a little bit of truth in that when you have this kind of technology piece, people don't want to have to do the other part of the equation. And they don't want to have it think. And again, this carries over probably to cars and everything else. But with this kind of rescue tool, obviously that's not the case. He goes on just to mention too the strides that have been taken, and even the last 15 years, and that was many years ago. Lives have been saved because of it, and that was different technology, and we've hopefully taken that to the next level. But at the end of the day, just the last line here says it's important to know how the new rescue tools work. So my big point here is just as things evolve, this hasn't changed since 2013, but as things evolving, it is very important for people to know how these changes are. So, and digital interference is a great example. I'll highlight that. You might know what it is, you might know what causes it, but how is it going to react? And so you need to know how the tools work. Innovation, and this is kind of the other part of it. These companies, whether it's fashion over function, function over fashion, whether it's marketing or actual speed and thing, you've seen all these things come out. And again, people want to pay more for a product, get more for a product. There's different things, and I won't go through this list one at a time, but you can get a lot in your transceiver. You can get an overwhelming amount, frankly. And even our top end transceiver that's in that $400. The nice part is, and I think this carries over to other brands, but it's still a simple interface, and it might have a passive feature that is working in the background that you may or may not be realizing you're using, but at the same time, all these advanced features that might be there, you may or may not have them to use. The last one I did separate, Bluetooth abilities. That's something I do want to step into a little more, which I will in a couple slides. But Bluetooth has opened up some new options with transceivers, and the first one, the key one, is just keeping that beacon updated. It's a process that originally was done by mailing it in or taking it to a update center or retailer or ski patrol. It could be done for a while at home with a cord and Windows application or whatever. And now it can be done all wirelessly, all through your phone, all through some of the various apps. I think 4 of the 5 companies currently have apps that will sync with their beacons and do a couple different things. So I'm gonna dive and spit on that. But maybe these are helpful, maybe they're not. Maybe when you get into some more advanced searching or search and rescue, you want some of these, scan or analog or some different things that you'll use and have that sharper knife. But for the most part, we see as many people that forget this gear at the average level versus just not having any or having it all. So time will tell what brings out of these. Now, if you ask Chat GTP what makes a modern beacon, I just wanted to be somewhat objective and say this isn't all totally my perspective, but you'll see that Chat has its own biases. It really doesn't know what the hell it's talking about. So it's got a couple good points, a couple things that just don't make sense. It's talking about screens. Sure, it's accurate there to a point. It's talking about microprocessors and magnetic flux patterns, some stuff that just doesn't make sense. And that's where you need, the people with experience and the simple tools and the things to bring this along. And at that basic level, and this is a transceiver that we discontinued. We don't use anymore. We ran it for several years between Europe and the U.S. But again, basic function of the beacons is really a basic technology. And again, I go back to this. Of the 3 phases, if you break up the beacon rescue search, the probing, the shoveling, and rescue involved, this is meant to be the quickest one. And again, even though a shovel might cost $60 to $100, and this is $300 to $400, whatever, the shoveling is going to take more time and be just as vital. And obviously, if you've looked at different accidents, the shovel has played a part in a rescue that a beacon didn't do anything, and it saved at the end. So there's different scenarios, different things. At the end, this is a takeaway though, and this is why I wanted to have this screen kind of be on its own. I was able to talk with one of the people involved in one of the worst accidents Utah's seen probably in the last 10 years. And it was an accident up Big Cottonwood Canyon. Several people, I think there was 4 that passed away. And that searcher actually used this model of beacon we're looking at. And I asked him at the end, I'm like, is there a takeaway that you have that you pass on, relative to transceivers? And, of all the stuff, if you go back to that innovation screen, those aren't the things that are making the difference. And what he said to me was, the display with the multi victims gave me an immediate sense. Like this one right now is telling us there's 3 victims out there. Those 1, 2, 3 on that side. And this searcher had the similar thing where he knew there was multiple people, and that's Wilson Glades accident was very unique in that 2 people were from that party and 2 people were from a party that he didn't know was even there. And so it's simple things that can also make a big difference in this kind of product. And again, if I go back to this currently sold, I'll just say, we're all on the same team here. All these beacons do those simple things good. And, it's not a too bad of a knife or too dull of a knife in this quiver, but at the same time, there is some standards or a baseline that I think have been reached personally as a modern transceiver. So now, if I was to send my wife in to buy a helmet and a beacon, right, or any friend, this is where my standard's at. So to go straight to it, and again, this is me, my research, what we've done. And again, I'm open to different answers, Q&A, or email me, whatever. But at a minimum, as a modern transceiver or someone at the counter, 3 antennas should be there. A beacon with a larger range. Again, you can have a brighter flashlight. Why not? You can go up above that standard 40-meter range into the 50, 60, up to 80 nowadays. And again, you get an earlier jump on the search and a more confident search as you're in that middle range. Group check mode. Group check is something else. Build it into your transceivers. Build it into your habits. There's a couple ways to do it. There's obviously the functional way that's taught in classes and courses. And then a few of the beacons, again, probably about half those modern beacons, will have a specific mode for checking that I'll go into a little more detail in a moment. But again, keeping it as a baseline, what makes a modern transceiver, a U-turn icon can be handy. Again, you're going the wrong way for those 5 paces. You're making the distance greater. You're in a panic. You're looking at the arrow. It's going to give you that notification and surprisingly accurate flip around 180 and get back on track. The other standard too is that multi-victim marking. So, there's a difference. I won't go into huge depth here, but between a single suppression, we're getting one signal at a time and going to the next closest. There's more and more larger searches happening. That was a statistic presented at ICAR this year where there's some kind of trend where there's a few more statistics with multiple people involved. And so if you can have that sharp tool to go from number 1 to number 2 to number 3 and number 4 or wherever you're at, by all means, you should have it. And then again, kind of a secondary thing, but a lot of these will have, some things from your interference notification, auto reverts, analog scan, Bluetooth. These are kind of secondary, but that first group, as well as, again, I go back to it, a simple screen, something easy to read. That's, to me, what should be that baseline or minimum standard as something sold today or purchased today. And again, if I took that standard and applied it here, I didn't want to put a bunch of different X's or take things off, but I think you would remove about 5 of these transceivers as either not a big range, not multi-victim marking, not interference management. And so, everyone's constantly innovating, and we'll see what the future brings, but that's where I would go. And regardless of the model, again, they're all made better now, but there's a few things on there that you really should. There's these secondary things that I would love to have, and one day we might have a little checklist to say, hey, do you know exactly how your auto revert works? Because a lot of these, there's a few middle price points that are on a timer, and does the person know what that time is? Do they know how it's going to respond? And so they've owned their beacon 1 or 2 years. These are some of the things that we see as a company that we're servicing. People also with the error codes. Again, a lot of these beacons are made to notify you if there's interference either in that 20 centimeter search position or in a 50 centimeter receive situation. So if you can have that notification, hey, there's some interference present. Maybe you can do something about it. Maybe you can't. Or we even get people that don't practice to this, and they'll be like, hey, I was leaning up against my snowmobile, or I have this on a table, and it keeps beeping, error send, error send. What's this? Is it broken? And so it's like, no, hey, it's letting you know. A lot of these are a little higher tech where they're letting you know there's some interference present. Again, maybe you can do something about it. Maybe you can't. We had a cat skiing operation that consistently everybody gets huddled in this big electronic environment, and a few people are saying error send, error send. It's just letting them all know, hey, I can't really clearly send a signal right now at this time. And again, they get out of the cat, it's fine, but that's maybe some data that they just didn't have in the past. And so to me, it's just mostly a positive here. Group check. This is one too. The two writers on the right there, there's a few things, and this is one thing I want to take home, because I've had conversations with some of the other manufacturers. You see a ton of social media and advertising. I like to joke, I call it beacon humping, but just right on top of each other. Number one, it's kind of not a real life, situation and search thing. You're not going to get typically that close, that quick, and that's not information you necessarily need. But the takeaway too is a lot of these that have a check mode, specifically, you're going into that group check mode, they're designed to be a meter apart. So while the close checking is better than no checking, and close checking can actually tell too if they're sending and transmitting, depending on what your protocols and everything is. A lot of the newer models that have those check modes, they like to be a meter apart. Why? Because they're measuring the strength of the signal from that distance. That's what they're calibrated for. They're measuring the frequency accuracy, that 457, that it's not drifted from that distance. It's a lot like interference. Interference is less of a factor when you're too close. Someone's yelling in your ear. It's the same kind of concept. And so that group check mode, again, this is a different way to practice than some people do. And so I want to just re-emphasize, go to your manual and go to your different, YouTube how-tos, everything like that. But yeah, some other things, just checking the software version of the beacons and everything else. One thing I did want to add, I didn't put on here though, but is the Bluetooth updates or Bluetooth capabilities. A lot of those do have practice scenarios in them. So I know Peeps does it, we do it. And so you can set up a couple different beacons in an ARVA park or in a beacon park scenario and turn them on or turn them off from the app. Or you can just kind of coach through some scenarios. These are some secondary methods, but again, think of a different way to practice. Think of something you've learned and you want to go see how it works. Get focused and look at some of these topics. So just in summary, a lot of those, what's really going to make a difference? Buying the most expensive beacon or having a beacon that and you're practicing the basics. You know what to expect. The range of your beacon. How it's going to perform. Knowing some of these secondary performances. So like I mentioned before, do you know how the auto revert works? Do you know how the group check works? Have you seen the U-turn and walked around with it? Walk away on purpose and see that flash and realize, okay, that's what that audible is. That's what that icon is. With interference too, this is where I just wanted to spend 1 second. And again, about a little more than half of those modern transceivers sold will alert you when there's interference present when you're searching. This is kind of one of the takeaways of the the technology and one of the worst case scenarios. So of all the scenarios, whether you have something close to it, but in receive mode, you're looking for someone and you have electronics close. This is where you would get one of two symptoms typically. And those symptoms are a reduced range or a ghost signal. And so, what's that going to look like? Again, let me give you some tools here to practice. Grab on a signal at 15, 20 meters. Put your beacon on top of your smartwatch. This is taking it to an extreme. Heated gloves, phones, some of these main culprits. Have it next to your snowmobile with those new digital screens and all those new machines. And, look at maybe without a signal and see if you can spot a ghost signal. Turn your snowmobile off, watch it kind of be residual for a second. Some different ways to practice where, hey, you've learned interference is real. You've learned that, how to mitigate it and get things off your body and things you can control, making them wear at groups checks and trailheads. But how is it actually going to work if you're in a panic and you missed it that day, right? And so what does it look like if your beacon reduced range? Did it tell you it reduced range? Or did it just happen to reduce range and you have no notification? Because that's two symptoms from two different models there. And then, annual function tests and diagnostics. This has become easier. And this is one really cool part, actually, that I'm more excited in the Bluetooth than anything. 2 of the 5 companies, I'll let you chase down which, ARVA is one of them, but have a diagnostic test. And it's cool because it's similar to mailing it off and having them go through a 25 or 40 point check and checking each battery fluctuation, each button, each switch, each antenna. And you can now do this from your living room. And up until a couple years ago, that was never a thing. And so Bluetooth has brought that. And I think it could be cool with the future because a lot of times some of these recalls might be small tweaks, whether it's a software tweak, or something else. You can now use a test to diagnose it, and that's going to be a good positive for everyone. And then just a couple, what really makes sense, knowing your partner's beacon. That one of those accidents I talked about, they're pulling batteries out. Is your beacon of your partner? You don't know how it marks, how it turns off. What are your protocols for that? Are you going to be ready in a moment of panic? So controlling what you can control. Those are the things you do at the trailhead with electronics. Those are the things that you can do. But sometimes there might be a radio tower. Be aware of it. Sometimes you get that notification. You need to tell everybody to come in on your search strips a little tighter. And so you're just knowing how to respond, whether it's interference or something else. But Bluetooth and updates are cool. And really at the end, we want this to be the shortest phase of the search. So we want you to have a sharp tool. We want you to have a modern beacon. But in a perfect world, the beacon is just a quick few minutes, and then you can get to a more successful, hopefully, shovel or everything like that. So that is the bulk of what I got. I'm certainly open up to some Q&As, but I hope that especially this season being so funky with snow levels being low, especially, that it might be a good time to say, hey, let's go out and take 5 minutes or 10 minutes and think about this thing that I just learned or I thought about or something else. So other than that, I'll come back to you, Ron, and some Q&A.
Thank you, Jeremy. There's one question asked earlier in the presentation. Let's see, someone wondered if there's a trade-in program for older transceivers.
Yeah, good question. So we do have one, and I know Ortovox does one as well, off and on. I'm not sure if it's consistent, but they've done it through their retailers. We do it in-house, and when we have people contacting us with older transceivers, it's not a marketed program, but we want them to have new stuff. And so, we'll say, we'll do a function test or we'll do a diagnostic for you. But, you're pushing 8 years, 10 years on this product. And if you'd like to, get $75 credit, we'll have that conversation on email or on the phone. But I think it's certainly something all manufacturers would encourage. And so, sometimes it's marketed, sometimes it's not, but.
Got it. Let's see. Next, any thoughts on the Nivea transceiver?
Yeah. I thought about putting that in here at times. It's a new one. It's and those of you that maybe aren't as familiar with it, it's one of those things where it's going to be have to be proven before people really take to it. But the idea and the concept, hopefully, if the result is there, people can run a straighter line and capture, another data point from a satellite. That's the idea. And a couple trains of thought. Number one is, I mentioned my slide so early. It's been a hard market to disrupt, and Nivea is actually, I think they're in the automotive sector, and so they're a very large company. and they're spinning off a branch to try to bring in this product and add a sixth, manufacturer. I love it. I mean, competition is going to be good for everybody. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you look at some of the similar technologies and things they're going to have to, I know that was delayed once with the battery power of the screen or something. So if those things get worked out, who doesn't want a faster transceiver? But until it's really put through the races and proven itself on the track, I think potentially shaving a minute off or potentially two is hypothetical of grabbing the satellite, and who knows what it'll bring, but it could be cool. Yeah, well, time will tell.
Copy. There's a question for us in the chat. If probing takes longer than the transceiver search, then the transceiver search was not done very well, says says someone commenting in the chat.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen some long probe searches, but mostly due to very big depths. And another thing that's interesting, you pick up on these little things of when, as a manufacturer, reading the reports. But a lot of beacons will lose their pinpoint at about 3 meters or 2, or depending on the brand. And there was a burial, I think here in Utah, where it was a 4 or 5 meter burial. So the transceiver they happen to be using didn't even go into pinpoint. It's still in that search mode with the arrows because they weren't close enough. And that's where the search and rescue. We have our 2 top beacons. Again, the Bluetooth can make them customizable, and one of those customizations is the marking distance can be adjusted from 3 meters to 5. 5 is pretty extreme, where it'll drop out of that search range and core search arrows into a pinpoint. But if you're in very deep snow, Alaska, some of the, maybe the Tetons or something on a big year, that can be a factor. And a lot of search and rescue at those points will use some of these secondary products like iProbes or a specialty probe that's 3.5 meters, 4 meters.
Copy. Wow.
But,
there's another question just popped in. Do you think that a more frequent period for a transceiver could produce more accurate searches? And what are the limitations on period and pulse?
Yeah. I've heard, and I just don't disagree with it, that changing that frequency, the 457, could give better accuracy or better speed or some better results. But there's the standard was too hard to change. And, I've talked to some of the people at rescue conferences that came in with that 457, and they're just like, it took way long to implement. It took longer than it should have. So to adjust the whole market, because part of the challenge there is you have all this retro in-use product in the market. And so if you changed it to a more efficient frequency, whatever the number might be, you might have the ability to distinguish multiple signals. You might have the ability to break snow better. But at the end of the day, it's a big task to make everybody throw away their 457s or take them off the shelves or adjust for what benefit. And so yeah, that's kind of my simple on that.
Another one. How reliable is ARVA's interference notification feature? How reliable is it?
Yeah, it's everything's improving. I mean, we're on like version 4 or version 5 within our software, and you go back to that 2016, 2018. I tell a lot of people this all the time, but the interference notifications are now coming into attention, right? And this is kind of that learning curve where you have, ARRI in a lot of the classes has this next generation of students learning. And where are they going to go to learn some of the basics? Because even if we have these interference notifications, just like a little bit of the gist of my presentation, most people aren't practicing these things first, to practice to move on to the nuances. And I'm not saying that no one's there, but mastering those basics, especially for newer users, are such a higher priority. And what I tell people is, ARVA and Baravox have been making interference notifications since 2016, 2017, but now it's being talked about. And, and then as of 21, 22, Ortovox picked up in their Dirac series, and then the IPS in receive mode would notify you. And so that's for the 5 brands that will give you a notification. And how well does it work? Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, the cool part too, and I've been there's so many degrees of like, hey, this is not going to cause, right? Take an Aura ring versus a Apple Watch versus a Garmin watch, and it's hard to kind of quantify all of these uh, different little nuances. So it's like, well, how well does it work? Well, what are you testing it against? And one thing that is really cool, and this is maybe towards a lot of the advanced users, the instructors here, but you can flip, our Neo BT Pro or like the nicer Bear Box, the S or the S2 will go into a raw analog mode, and you can look at each source. You can put it next to a snowmobile, and you can hear that interference. It's been done, in presentations with the F1 and some of these older analog beacons, and sure, those pull it, but as a new tool, you can flip those into that old mode and kind of gauge exactly the source and gauge how well it works for yourself and your environment and what you're putting into it. And so that analog is another level of being able to show it and be able to diagnose it, and it's cool at that high level. But otherwise, hey, the icon itself is a cool data support set to like, oh, at a minimum, I need to shrink up my search widths because I don't want to walk, do 20-meter strips when someone's 25 meters away, right? Or they might be 15, whatever the worst case pairing scenario and the worst case interference scenario might be. And so to know all those different levels and be able to show them, it's cool. And then, like I said, just really quick, a lot of people don't realize the technology back when in 2020 it stages down, and so it's got a little bit of interference. Well, it just turned that 60-meter beacon or that 80-meter beacon into a 40-meter beacon, right? It cut out that background noise, it cut out some of those interference to focus on a smaller area and focus on a tighter, the results there. And so that's how those work inside.
Cool. Stephen remembers a time when he had to send his transceiver in the mail to the manufacturer to have it verified or recalibrated. And
Yeah,
is that still something that folks do or need to do?
it's yeah, it's a good habit. Good job, Steven. And it's something you need to do, but you need to do it less and less. And so because of largely the Bluetooth and these factors, they're built with a little better components typically, and but some of the older models, that's where you get a lot of people, the 8-year-old, 10-year-old, and they want to send them in for function test. It's very common in Europe, and in Europe they actually charge for it. I guess I shouldn't let too much out of the bag here, but in the US, I think it's pretty much a free service amongst all brands. But yeah, it's just like a ski patrol fleet, be it airbags, be it beacons, that about every 3 years, 2 years, depending on the usage, you could, if you can get with the manufacturer and send it in or have a validation, a full diagnostic done. It's a good habit for sure. And there's not necessarily a cadence to it, but 3 years is probably the time to consider it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um, Jeremy, I'm going to share a couple of slides here to wrap us up.
Great.
You got my slides?
Yeah.
Okay. Folks, we're almost wrapping up this education series. We have 3 left. We've got radios and some stuff on boots, and then some fun rescue and pointers from Black Diamond, specifically avalanche safety and rescue for climbers coming from Black Diamond. So that'll be really great. All 3 of those are next month. Um, Lastly, AREA is a nonprofit, and we're all dealing with the consequences of low snow around the country, and so any help you can give, grab that QR. We offer these webinars to the public for free, but any support for AREA through donations or your own generosity would be appreciated. You can grab that QR and help us out if you can. All right, I'm gonna pop out of the share here.
Great.
All right, I'm popping out of the share.
Okay, awesome.
That was a lot of fun, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to catch up with you guys, and hope everybody has a good rest of the evening and good season.
Yeah,
Pray for
excellent. Um, Everybody, this video will be up on YouTube, and yeah, we'll look forward to the comments continuing there. Thanks all.
See ya. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.